So I believe that everyone should do what they think is right and do what makes them happy. That is what I believe people should do. And then that brings the topic of murderers. I am against murder, but he thought it was the right thing to do, and I believe that people should do it. Like, not kill people, but like do what they think is right. And at the same time, I think that no one deserves to die.
The mother had woken just hours earlier to find Serena's bed empty. There was no note, no text message, nothing to explain where she could have gone. But by evening, the search was already over. It was a Tuesday night in September, a night like any other in Surrey, British Columbia. But in the East Newton neighbourhood, police tape was now being strung across the brush near a set of railway tracks. Officers moved slowly, marking the ground with yellow evidence flags. There was the sound of crickets, mixed with the low hum of idling patrol cars. Something terrible had been found, and soon the news would spread. The fear was immediate. Police Chief Superintendent Bill Fordy stood before cameras the very next day. His voice was steady, but his eyes portrayed the weight of what he was saying. "Any loss of life is a tragedy," he said, but Serena had her whole life ahead of her. The messaging from the police was clear. This was not an accident. This was not an unfortunate twist of fate. Random, perhaps, but it was also completely predictable. Serena's case moves in unbearable slow motion. It was 30 years in the making. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I'm trying out some longer, deep dive style videos, because it's good to mix things up and see what works and see what happens sometimes. And actually, I think that applies to life in general. Thank you everyone for being here, and an extra special massive thank you to Patreon members and YouTube channel members too. And as a quick silly little question, what is your ideal video length for these dark cases? Let me know down in the comments. But now, on with the video.
Hi guys, it's Serena. So, I'm just walking home from hanging out with Logan, Maddie, and Ella. And, okay, I was crossing the street to get to the street that I live on. Please don't stalk me. And, like, I was in the middle of the street where it's like that one of those little bumpy things, islands or whatever. And, a car behind me went by, so I saw its shadow, and then it like went through my shadow, and I freaked out for a second because I thought I was getting hit by a car. And I felt really stupid until I realized that it was a shadow. And yeah,
Before we really talk about what happened to Serena, I really want to talk about who she actually was. Because to reduce her to just being a headline, to let her exist only as a victim, is really to strip away the very thing that made this loss so devastating. Serena Vermeersch was 17. She was a student at Sullivan High Secondary School. She was a daughter, a friend, a girlfriend, and she wasn't defined by the way that her life ended. So let's define her by the way that she lived. Serena's left us something that's pretty rare, especially when you consider that this case is over a decade old. She left us fragments of herself online, her YouTube channel, her Facebook posts, her voice captured in square format. We get to see the everyday expressions of someone that's searching for connection, and honestly probably still searching for herself. Maybe she was imagining hitting the big time on YouTube, and that's what makes this so powerful. There's moments of self-expression of a real person. All of this was Serena's way of being seen in a world that often feels overwhelming at that age. Sometimes she spoke softly. She was maybe even hiding what she was doing shyly from the other people in her home. Other times she laughed and fooled around in front of the camera, smiling through awkwardness, finding her confidence one video at a time. I think the age she was when she made the videos, along with the fact that they were recorded in 2013 or 2014, it was genuinely a different and more organic and innocent time online. And that's what makes her footprint more powerful today when we look back. It lets us see Serena not through police reports, but through her own lens, how she wanted to be seen. On her channel, she came across as a girl still figuring out who she was, a little vulnerable, a little uncertain, but still opinionated and full of potential. Her classmates later said that she was quiet at times, perhaps introspective, but she was funny and creative too. She was always sketching, always daydreaming. She was someone who had her eyes on the future, even if she wasn't sure yet exactly what that would look like. Her family described her as spirited, someone who could make an impact when she wanted to, someone that should have had so much time to fully find the person that she wanted to be.
I want to show you guys the pictures on my wall, because I think that's a good idea. So I'm gonna do that, okay?
And here's where I want to kind of step out the video for a moment, because when I look at Serena's videos, I see someone that I feel like I could have known. And this probably doesn't come as a shock to you guys, but I'm very much from the emo scene of 20 years ago. So Serena's aesthetic, her form of self-expression, the black eyeliner, the fringe, using music as a lifeline. Watching Serena, I see echoes of that time and the people that I knew and that I still know. She could have been a face that you always saw at local shows. She could have been a friend of a friend. But yeah, and I feel like I might have lost this somewhere along the way on this channel. But I really want everyone to remember that the people in these videos were real people. And that's exactly what makes these stories worth telling. But it's also what makes them hurt even more. So I don't know about you, but I don't feel like Serena is really a stranger. She feels like someone that we all could have known somewhere along the way. I'm actually recording this voiceover in the middle of a storm, so if you can hear the rain hitting my window, I'm sorry, but it might even sound nice, I don't know. Serena's final Facebook post came just days before she met her end. It was a simple photo of herself, and the caption read, "I'm lonely." It's a phrase that, in hindsight, feels unbearably heavy. But at that time, it was just the kind of thing that any teenager may write. A passing thought, a small expression that goes out into the void of the internet. But after the news of her passing broke, dozens of comments appeared beneath that post. They were from friends, neighbours, even strangers who had never met her. They said things like, "You were a beautiful girl, inside and out. Another angel taken too soon. You will live on in our hearts and never be forgotten." Her page became a memorial, a place where people could say goodbye, even as they struggled to understand exactly what had happened. The videos on her YouTube channel stopped in February of that year, but her voice and her personality is still there, and in a way, on the internet, she's forever young. Every clip feels like a window into the life that could have been, a life filled with love, mistakes, laughter, music, and discovery. All the things that we take for granted as we're young and we grow, but all things that she never got to finish or experience. And with this picture of Serena in mind, let's move on to the night in question. It was Monday evening, September the 15th, 2014, the last time anyone saw Serena Vermeersch alive. At 8:15 p.m, she boarded a transit bus at the corner of 128th Street and 64 Avenue. She wore a blue tank top and black shorts. She was actually pretty tall for her age, standing at 5'8". And as we know, she had a presence and aesthetic that probably would have stood out at that time. But this night was not unusual in any other way. It was a routine trip after visiting her boyfriend, one that she had taken many times before. But this time, something went very, very wrong. When her mother woke up the next morning, Serena's bed was empty. The silence in the house felt palpable. And by 9 a.m, with all reasonable avenues covered, panic turned into action. Her mother called the police to report her missing, giving all the information that she could muster. Her daughter's appearance, the bus that she should have taken, where she was coming from and going to. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police began with the basics. They checked transit records, they spoke to bus drivers, they canvassed other riders who may have noticed her. Posters were quickly designed and printed, her physical description was shared. Neighbours were questioned and then told to keep an eye out, to call the police immediately if they saw anything. For Serena's family, the hours dragged on. The search felt endless. Her mother later described the moment as a nightmare unfolding in real time. Every ring of the phone brought a rush of hope, and then a crash of dread. By evening, investigators were already extremely concerned. 17-year-olds don't just vanish. And Serena was not the kind of person to just disappear without a word. The Serious Crime Unit became involved. They began collecting surveillance footage from the area. They started piecing together her last known movements. And at first, there was still hope. Maybe she had unexpectedly gone to her friends. Maybe she'd gotten off the bus a few stops early. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But by nightfall, that hope was fading. For now, all the public knew was that a teenage girl was missing, and every passing hour made it less likely that she would be found safe. And on the evening of September the 16th, 2014, the search ended in horror.
Couldn't have asked for a better friend. Thank you for being such an amazing friend.
This picture collage was created by a friend of murdered Surrey teen Serena Vermeersch.
We all love and miss you, beautiful.
We're concealing the identities of her friends because their parents are worried there's still a killer on the loose.
I just miss her and love her so much, and I just wish she was still here.
Vermeersch was last seen alive on Monday night at 8:15 as she left her boyfriend's house and boarded a transit bus at the corner of 128th Street and 64th Avenue.
All I know is that she was coming back from his house, and she got on the bus and never returned home. And then for hours, my friends were looking, they called me.
She'd always walked that way. For 3 years, nothing happened. And then on this one night, when she was 5 minutes away from home, it happened.
It's just horrible. Like, why would you go after a 17-year-old girl?
There's still no arrests or suspects in her death. Police say she was killed in a random attack, a crime of opportunity. Today, investigators are still actively searching the area where the teen's body was found. As a memorial of flowers grows at the crime scene, friends are remembering a young girl who was looking forward to starting grade 12 next week.
She's a sweet, bright kind of person, and she just made everyone happy, and she was always there for everyone and like always cheering people up.
But she was so nice to everybody. She never harmed anything. She was a vegan. She just loved everybody.
The first sign came in Ontario, 1989. It was November the 12th. Dryden, a small northern city, where neighbours knew each other and each other's business, and where serious crime was rare. That night, an 18-year-old man forced his way into an apartment. Inside was a 19-year-old woman. He cut her off from safety. He held her against her will. And when police closed in, that man tried to escape. He smashed his way through a window, shards of glass cutting his body. Red now stained the snow outside. The man crawled under a vehicle trying to hide, but officers soon dragged him out. The victim was thankfully freed. Constable Shane McKinnon later said, if the incident hadn't been resolved as quickly as it had, there's no telling what the situation might have been the next day. Charges obviously followed: kidnapping, threats, possession of an imitation weapon, breaking and entering. Even at 18, this man's crimes were predatory. They were targeted. They were designed to control and to terrify. But this man's violence was only set to escalate, and 2 years later he moved to British Columbia, and what came next was somehow even worse. September the 16th, 2014, a Tuesday evening in Surrey, British Columbia. Police cruisers idled in East Newton, their red and blue lights washing across the quiet streets. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze, and beyond it, officers swept flashlights through the brush along the railway tracks. Neighbours stood at a distance, whispering. Something terrible had been found, and soon the truth spread. It was a body, and it belonged to Serena Vermeersch. Missing since just the evening before, she was already found close to the railway tracks. The location was not far from Highland Creek, a shortcut that locals often avoided after dark. Police quickly confirmed that her death was indeed suspicious, and just hours later, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team had taken over.
We have a 17-year-old girl who had the rest of her life to live, and she has been taken from her friends and her family by a person that we have yet to identify, and I find that offensive.
The next morning, Chief Superintendent Bill Fordy faced the cameras. His voice was steady, but his words cut deep. Any loss of life is a tragedy, he said. But Serena had just turned 17 and had her whole life ahead of her. They believed that this was not an accident. They didn't believe it was done for revenge, but for something even worse. This was a random crime of opportunity. It was the kind of violence that could have claimed anyone. The community's fear was immediate. Parents drove their kids to school instead of letting them walk or get the bus. Neighbours kept porch lights on throughout the night. Strangers murmured in grocery store aisles, asking, "Did you hear about the girl?" Flowers quickly appeared near the tracks. Candles flickered against the police tape. Handwritten notes and floral arrangements now piled to form a memorial. For a city already uneasy with crime, Serena's passing felt like a breaking point. Investigators had to work quickly. They knocked on doors. They collected surveillance from buses, shops, and traffic cameras. They did their best to piece together Serena's final movements, boarding the bus, taking her seat, leaving the bus, and then gone. They issued a public appeal. Investigators are looking to speak with anyone who may have been on that bus and saw Serena, police said, adding, or anyone who saw her get off. And then came the sighting. There was a man in dark clothing. He was seen walking along the railway tracks between 5 p.m. and 7:15 p.m. Witnesses said he left the location in a grey or silver Dodge pickup truck, a 3/4 ton. They said the truck had a canopy and a roof rack. Police called him a person of interest, saying that he could have been someone who might hold the key to Serena's final moments. Those words sent a ripple of paranoia across Surrey. Every grey truck looked suspicious. Every man near the tracks a potential threat. Chief Superintendent Fordy tried to reassure the public, but his warning only deepened the dread. Serena should be at Sullivan Heights, he said, having a laugh with classmates, thinking about graduation. But sadly, that is not the case. And then he urged extreme vigilance, with investigators believing that this event was totally random. It was that randomness that terrified people most of all. And Surrey was already no stranger to crime. There were break-ins, gang violence, trap houses. But those things had explanations, as troubling as they were. But this attack, along with a handful of others, an innocent young woman ended on her walk home, with no evidence of any motive. This meant it could happen to anyone.
In September of this year, 2013, I'm going back to school to start 11th grade. To be honest, I'm kind of looking forward to it. But at the same time, I'm really nervous and scared because I know quite a few of my friends aren't going to be there. Some are graduating early. Some aren't coming back to school for a little while. And there's going to be new people, meaning some of the people I hung out with may start hanging out with other people. So I'm scared of that. But I'm still actually looking forward to it.
At Sullivan Heights Secondary, friends lit candles. Posters with Serena's name filled the hallways.
Today, many of these students had been looking forward to for months, the chance to catch up with old friends on the first day of school. But the mood here at Sullivan Heights Secondary is anything but joyful. These teens are crushed by the death of their friend and classmate, Serena Vermeersch, who would have started grade 12 today.
It's devastating. It's really affected everyone at school. You can tell people are a little down on themselves. It's hard knowing that something like this could happen.
Some of Vermeersch's closer friends even came to school with mementos.
She always wore a bracelet like this that said RIP for her friend that died. So I made one that says Snoots because she always said that she liked that word.
It's honestly quite frightening because I would never think that someone that I'd studied with since grade 8, I've known her since grade 8, would end up like this. So it's you never know what's gonna happen.
I get so much anxiety now being out at night because that's all I'm thinking about.
She was the type of person that help you whenever you needed help, and she'd never say no. And she'd be quiet but really funny at times, and well, she was just a really good person overall.
It's the kind of tribute that Dot and Vermeersch's other friends thought they'd be able to write in her yearbook at the end of the year. Now they'll never get the chance. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Surrey.
Reporters pressed police for details. How did she die? Did she know her killer? What evidence had they found? But investigators gave nothing away. At the time, the cause of death was sealed. The evidence kept quiet. All the public knew was that another daughter was now gone, and someone, perhaps somebody living among them, was responsible for all of this. At night time, Newton grew quieter still. The shortcut paths were empty. The Highland Creek Bridge deserted. Residents checked their locks twice, closed their curtains earlier, and eyed every passing pickup with suspicion, because until that killer was caught, not a single person in Surrey was safe. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Pound of the homicide team stood before reporters. Her words were direct. "We are looking to speak with anyone who might have seen Serena, either on the bus or when she got off the bus." She urged extreme vigilance within the community. She urged caution, and her warning was chilling. Because if this was indeed completely random, if this was truly just a crime of opportunity, then the perpetrator could have been anyone, and this also meant it could happen again to any other random member of the community. Serena's disappearance and discovery within the span of just 24 hours left Surrey shaken. The shock was a sharp one. The fear was immediate. It encouraged people to ask questions. Who had done this and why? That answer was coming, but to find it, we need to go back. Before the night of September the 15th, before the bus, before the railway tracks, and take a look at someone, something that should never have been. To understand how Serena's life was stolen, we actually have to go back decades, long before she was even born. From the moment Serena's body was discovered, investigators knew that time was critical, and this suspect could strike again. The pressure on the integrated homicide investigation team was immense. The first big lead was the truck, the grey or silver Dodge. Witnesses said they'd seen it near the tracks, and it was close to where Serena's body was found. The witnesses said it left the area at around 7 p.m. It then made a U-turn at Upland Road before heading east on 66th Avenue towards 148th Street. This didn't mean that they could name a suspect, but at least it gave the investigation some direction. Police put out a public appeal. They asked for anyone who might recognize a truck, anyone who may have seen it parked nearby, anyone who knew who could have been driving it.
Okay, a lot of murderers, none of them, hardly any have ever said they killed someone just because they think it's the right thing to do. They always had a reason, whether it be or someone owed them money but never gave it back, or gangs, or all that stuff. They didn't do it because they thought it was the right thing to do. Most of them. I haven't heard of any murderer that said they thought it was the right thing to do by killing someone. I have never heard that, ever. And, they had their reasons for it. But, okay, back in, a long time ago, people didn't care so much if someone murdered another person. It wasn't as big a deal as it is now, because society frowns upon it, saying it's a bad thing to do, and suddenly there's laws against it.
Behind the scenes, detectives were already narrowing in. They canvassed the area for CCTV footage. They looked at traffic cameras, corner stores and bus routes. They followed up on tips from the public. They compared sightings with one another, and each clue trimmed the list of possibilities, and each lead pushed them closer to one man, and that man was already known to the police. In fact, his name was in their files from only the year before. 1991, Abbotsford, July the 21st. At the Trethewey House Heritage Site, a quiet museum run by the MSA Museum Society, a 21-year-old student was working her summer job alone inside. The same man from Dryden in 1989 entered the site with a sharp implement. He threatened her, and then he violated her repeatedly. He then forced her into a vehicle. Together they drove south towards the American border. He then took her into a wooded area. He disgustingly violated her again. before tying her to a tree and then leaving the location. Somehow the woman survived, but the ordeal obviously scarred her for life. Police caught the man just days later. Another horrifying event, another victim, and now the pattern of escalation was undeniable. In court, he faced a catalogue of charges: kidnapping, forcible confinement, robbery, 2 counts of violations with a weapon. This time his sentence was severe, 22 years in prison. This sentence was given to protect the public. It was meant to give time for treatment. It was meant to keep the man off the streets. But most sentences, no matter how long, they all have an end. And for the next 2 decades, that end was always coming. This man's name was Raymond Lee Casey.
Serena Vermeersch was found on a set of railroad tracks not far from her home. Police have made an arrest. 43-year-old Raymond Casey was picked up in Vancouver on Saturday. He is charged with second-degree murder.
This is a random attack, so we really do come into this investigation from ground zero.
Behind bars, Casey's record only grew darker. Correctional staff documented a man who remained violent, a man that was manipulative and unrepentant. He was repeatedly caught with illicit substances and weapons too. A homemade sharp implement was found in his cell. Other times he made threats against staff. He offered challenges to fight correctional officers. He refused SO maintenance programs, calling them a waste of time, dismissing their value. And when he did attend programming, psychologists said that the results were minimal. They said that he showed little empathy for his victims, little insight into his own terrible behaviour, and little to no willingness to change. Parole board documents from the mid-2000s were blunt. He was moderate to high risk to re-offend, and his level of risk would escalate quickly without any warning. One report noted that he ruminated on perceived slights and then fantasized about revenge. Another described his long history of sexually inappropriate and violent behavior dating back to his youth. All of this combined meant that the conclusion was always the same: detention confirmed, parole denied. Year after year, the reports piled up. 2006 read, if released, you are likely to commit an offence, causing the death of or serious harm to another person. 2007, you have shown no meaningful insight. 2008, in addition to your sexual deviance, you fantasize about taking revenge. 2009, your serious institutional behaviour has had further negative impact on your case. 2011, you do not have the skills you need to monitor and manage your risk in the community. 2012, your refusal to participate significantly increases your risk. And bizarrely, even Casey himself admitted this. He told officers that he wasn't ready for release, that he himself feared that he would re-offend, that he might be safer staying inside. But admissions or self-awareness don't stop the clock. The law doesn't bend for warnings, and time kept on moving.
When we talk about dealing with high-risk offenders, what is the best way to start to change the way we've seen things happen?
Well, let's acknowledge the fact that people, certainly all of us, have a right to be deeply disturbed and angry about what's happened. In terms of the system, we've gone through a phase in the last little while of increasing sentences, increasing punishments, and decreasing an emphasis on treatment and making sure that people get the treatment that they need. We've got all of the pieces that we need in place to make sure that people like Mr. Casey are contained, are watched by police and watched by probation. We need to question what happened with him in terms of treatment and assessment while he was inside.
When you look at what happened in his previous conviction in Abbotsford in the 1990s, when he was first in prison, he was interviewed by a psychiatrist, and he's quoted as saying, quote, "I'm comfortable in jail. I'm used to it. I know where I stand in here. If that's what it takes, I shouldn't be out." How do people like this get released back into the community?
We have a judicial system that imposes a sentence, and when that sentence is up, we have absolutely no choice but to return them to the community and return them under the best circumstances possible. We need to make sure that these people are supervised for extensive periods of time, that they have support, that they have treatment provisions, whether that's through BC Corrections or through some other avenue. When a person is released, as Mr. Casey was at the end of his sentence, when the sentence, the warrant of committal has expired, there is nothing for them in the community. There's no treatment. There's no place that they can go to say that I'm struggling or I think I need to go back to jail.
And Andrew, just as a final point here, how effective could treatment really be, knowing that you have spent most of your adult life behind bars? I know there's some calls for legislation to change the effectiveness and quality of treatment and assessments that happen, but when you spend that much time incarcerated, what is realistic when released back into the community?
A person spending that long in prison, they should be spending most of that time in some form of treatment, and that treatment needs to be continued when they reach the street. It is effective, can be effective, but at all times, a person needs to be monitored in terms of their motivation to complete treatment. I'm pretty certain that if Mr. Casey is guilty and is convicted, that he probably will not see the light of day again under the terms of the dangerous offender applications that probably weren't as available in 1990 as they certainly are today.
Well, Andrew,
so the change has already been made in the system since the 1990s, since Mr. Casey was first sentenced. His sentencing now will look entirely different than it was back in 1990.
Andrew, we thank you very much for your insight this morning. Andrew McWhinney, a counselor, joining us on the line this morning.
By 2013, the end was near. His warrant expiry was approaching. The parole board issued one final report. It said, "There has been no change in the risk you present to the community." In fact, they wrote that his behaviour had worsened. This was their final word, but it changed nothing. Because once a sentence expires in Canada, the doors open. This is no matter what the reports say, no matter the level of risk. In March of 2013, Raymond Casey walked free. He was 42 years old. He had now spent more than half of his life in prison, and he had given every indication that he was not safe. Police issued a rare public warning where they described him as a high-risk SO. They said he posed a significant threat to women. The community was told to be vigilant, but really they had no choice, because the fact was he was living among them now. And then, less than 18 months later, Serena boarded that bus. Raymond Lee Casey wasn't just another ex-convict trying to rebuild his life. He was someone who had spent more than 2 decades in prison. Yet, here he was, living freely in Surrey. And then on Saturday, September the 20th, just 4 days after Serena's body was found, police made their move. Vancouver officers arrested Casey without incident. He was taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder. At first, his name wasn't released publicly. This was because of a publication ban. Police said that they couldn't publicly identify him. However, journalists quickly uncovered the truth. And by Monday morning, headlines across Canada carried it out. The man accused of ending Serena Vermeersch was the very same man that police had warned the community about. The reaction was instant, and it was furious. Surrey Mayor Diane Watt said what many were already thinking. When he was released, "I had significant concerns, and I still do. We can't be putting high-risk offenders into communities without the tools to keep the public safe." And parents echoed her outrage. One mother told reporters, "We have a third of our population under the age of 19, and now we know that a high-risk offender was living here, free to walk the same streets as our kids. It's unacceptable."
He's been out since 2013. Since then, police say they have been watching him. Today, RCMP are not commenting. In a statement, they said high-risk offenders are subject to regular monitoring, reporting, ongoing threat risk assessments, and compliance checks. We have no information to suggest he was in breach of any 810 condition prior to Vermeersch being reported missing. 810 conditions, like parole conditions, are given by the court if there is reason to believe that someone is at a high risk to reoffend. Casey was to be monitored for 2 years. That's the maximum term. Former police chief Cash Heed says that he was likely under a lot of covert surveillance, but only for a few months.
They cannot sustain it for extended periods of time. It would be millions and millions of dollars, especially when this person shouldn't be out on our streets right now.
The province says it will be reviewing its policies about high-risk offenders.
He was closely monitored in the community. Were there gaps? Were there other things that could have been done? Those are the things that we're going to be look at that right now.
Anton says she will be speaking with her federal counterparts to see if more can be done to protect citizens. Minister Peter MacKay says it's a high priority.
We are looking at legislation. We are looking at ways in which we can toughen the parole provisions. But also, we're looking at ways in which the very worst, those who are most violent, those who have committed offenses, murder, in concert with other violent offenses against the public and the individual, that they're never released.
But some experts say it's not that simple.
Keep him in prison forever? Well, how many people are we going to keep in prison forever? Can we afford to do this? Is that the kind of society we want to live in? Right? So I would say no.
The community on large felt a sense of betrayal, because it's not like this was an unknown threat. It was a threat that had already been predicted. It had been written down time and time again and circulated in official warnings. And still, Serena was gone. Chief Superintendent Bill Fordy spoke again to the media. He was visibly emotional. This type of crime galvanizes our community and touches them in an incredible way. Police now reassured residents that the suspect was in custody, but this reassurance was hollow, because the larger question still remained. How was he ever freed in the first place?
That's right. It's our understanding that until recently he lived in Whalley in an apartment over a number of businesses just off of King George Highway. Now, we spoke to some people in the area who said they recognized him, that he was a fairly quiet man. Also, a business owner that mentioned that he had actually approached him looking for odd jobs to make money. Other than that, still a lot of questions remain about what, if any, sort of surveillance he had been under after that public warning was issued about him last year. He will make his next court appearance on October 2nd.
The revelation that Casey had been released, despite years and years of warning, shook more than just Surrey. It spread across British Columbia, across Canada, and into Parliament. Because if the parole system had known that he was dangerous, if even he himself had admitted that he was not ready for release, then why was Serena now gone? To fully understand the outrage that followed what happened to Serena, we have to understand Surrey in 2014, a city already on the edge. Surrey sits just across the Fraser River from Vancouver. It's one of Canada's fastest growing cities, a place where young families came for affordable housing, where schools overflowed with students. So on paper, Surrey was a city of opportunity, but on the ground, many residents felt something else entirely. Services struggled to keep up. Transit, policing, housing, all were stretched thin, and crime seemed to rise with the population. Residents described entire neighbourhoods that felt unsafe, trap houses tucked between family homes, places where strangers came and went at all hours, parks and walkways littered with discarded needles. Newton, the area where Serena lived and met her end, carried much of that weight. Newton was once described as a suburban hub, quiet, residential, a place ideal to raise your family. But by 2014, locals spoke of a different Newton, one where families stayed inside after dark, where parents warned daughters to avoid certain streets, where shortcuts through parks and creeks now felt dangerous. The Highland Creek Bridge, not far from where Serena's body was found, was one of those places. It was poorly lit, surrounded by overgrowth. However, it was a shortcut that many people knew, but most people avoided it after the sun went down. When Serena met her end, residents weren't shocked that something happened there. They were horrified, they were devastated, but they were not shocked. This is because they'd already felt their community slipping, and Serena's demise only seemed to confirm their worst fears. But Serena was not the first or last victim in the area. Her killing came after a series of high-profile tragedies that had already shaken Surrey. December 2013, just 9 months before Serena's end, Julie Pascal, a 53-year-old hockey mom, was attacked outside the Newton Arena. She was simply waiting to pick up her teenage son. It had been just an ordinary Sunday night, but this attack was brutal, it was random, and she would not survive. The event struck at the heart of community life. If a mother could be beaten to death while waiting for her child after a hockey game, what did that say about safety in Newton?
A memorial continues to grow outside the Newton Recreation Centre as friends, family, and complete strangers continue to pay tribute to Julie Pascal. Her death has left many people worried about their safety.
It's hitting too close to home now, and this poor woman was just picking up her son, and it's so busy here. People are getting in and out of their cars all day and all day, all night. Like, it's so scary.
Residents described feeling exposed. Even the most routine activities suddenly felt dangerous. And 2 years earlier still, in 2011, Maple Battalia's name had already left its mark on Surrey. She was 19, a student at Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus, an aspiring actress and model. Her time was ended outside the university parkade by her own ex-boyfriend. This time a crime of control and jealousy, a crime that stunned her peers and broke her family.
It's been a year, but the pain never really goes away. On the 1-year anniversary of Maple Battalia's murder, a new documentary is being released to honor the popular SFU student's artistic talent.
What I wanted to really focus on was she was equally as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside, and her artwork speaks that.
For Rosaline Battalia, the memories of the night her sister was shot to death still haunt her.
It makes you angry in a way that she was just footsteps away from her car. It was just right there. And it just makes you it's like a big shock.
Battalia's killer is still out there. The 19-year-old was murdered in the parking lot of SFU's Surrey campus September 28, 2011, after a late-night study session. The actor and model had dreams of becoming a doctor. A 2011 white Dodge Charger captured on camera fleeing the scene after the shooting was seized by investigators, but RCMP haven't released details about the owner.
Just knowing the person who's done this got away and, is still out there probably enjoying life. And, it's frustrating because, you want that justice.
Battalia's 19-year-old ex-boyfriend, Gurjinder Dhaliwal, was charged with allegedly assaulting Battalia at a Tim Hortons just 4 days before her murder. The charges were later stayed because of a lack of evidence. Police won't say if he's a suspect.
When's the last time you saw me?
The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team continues to investigate tips in this murder case, but so far, no one has been arrested. Officers know there are still people out there in the community who have vital information, and they're pleading with them to come forward.
Just help us get our justice that we deserve. And no daughter, no sister, deserves to go through what my sister went through. She was innocent. And for you to stay quiet, it's not the right thing.
Maple's tragic ending raised new questions about whether Surrey was truly safe for young people. And now, just 3 years onwards, Serena's name was added to the list. Another young woman, another life cut short. By 2014, Surrey had recorded 17 homicides, one of the highest totals in its history. The year before, though, had been even worse. 25 homicides in 2013, a terrible record for the city. Some were gang-related, some domestic, and some, like Serena's, were horrifyingly random. Altogether, they painted a picture of a city struggling with violence. Local parents described new, necessary routines. They now drove their kids everywhere instead of letting them walk. They avoided certain areas altogether. They checked whether their doors and windows were locked more than once before bed. Even long-time residents now admitted that they were thinking about moving, looking for somewhere smaller, somewhere safer, a place where their children could grow up without constant fear. And in this already fraught atmosphere, what happened to Serena was more than just another tragedy. It was the breaking point for the community. So the outrage that followed was not just about one girl. It was not just about one offender. It was about an overarching pattern. A sense that violence had now become part of the city's identity, and that no one, not mothers, not students, not teenagers heading home from the bus stop, were actually truly safe. And with this overall context, when the community learned who had been charged with Serena's attack, it exploded with anger. The man accused was not unknown. This was not a strange mystery. Casey was just a monster that had been set free in their streets. The worst case scenario had now become a reality. On Saturday, September the 20th, when officers arrested 43-year-old Raymond Lee Casey, he was taken into custody without incident. By Monday morning, he was charged with second-degree murder. The political fallout was swift and fierce. Federal Justice Minister Peter MacKay promised changes. We're looking at ways in which the very worst, that they're never released, he told reporters. He spoke of reforms to parole, of ensuring that the most violent offenders could be locked away permanently.
Mr. Speaker, after years of soft on crime policies from the Liberal government, Canadians can now count on a government to re-establish Canada as a country where those that break the law are punished with penalties that match the crime. To date, our government has presented over 30 justice bills. We made it a priority to protect our most vulnerable, our children, by cracking down on predators. We've introduced more consecutive and mandatory minimum sentences for serious violent crime, got rid of the faint hope clause, raised the age of consent and gave more protection for victims. Mr. Speaker, serious violent crime deserves serious time. That's what our government's delivering.
British Columbia Premier Christy Clark echoed the sentiment. She said it bluntly. There is no amount of monitoring that is as good as keeping someone behind bars. She admitted she wasn't normally in favour of lock them up and throw away the key, but in situations like Casey's, she argued, exceptions had to be made. And her words seemed to capture the mood of the province. It was an anger mixed with disbelief. Others then joined the chorus. Cash Heed, a former Solicitor General and Police Chief, said, "You are not going to find a more tragic incident, a finer example of the laws in Canada that need to be changed when we deal with these predators that cause havoc in society." Wally Opal, former Attorney General, acknowledged the dilemma more cautiously. He said, "You can't, in the absence of compelling evidence, take proceedings against someone who has already served their sentence. That's the real dilemma in a democracy." But even he admitted this tragedy should have been avoided.
You have to have maybe some kind of a hold on people where there is a real danger that the person is still a danger to the public. But the fact is, though, if you've already served your sentence, you have paid your debt to society. So it's pretty difficult for the system, society, to put that person back in jail after they've done their sentence.
Community members spoke of feeling abandoned. One said, "It feels like we're experiments, like they let these people out just to see what happens." Another said, "Why does public safety always come second?"
We still feel kind of unsafe, even though there was an arrest. So, yeah, we're still really careful.
It's still kind of dangerous there. There's so many people like that probably, who'd just kill someone on spot.
So in this instance, the arrest of Raymond Casey didn't really bring relief. It just brought more questions and more anger. And it brought the realization that community warnings are pretty meaningless if they are not acted upon. It seemed like the responsibility was on the members of the public to somehow stay safe. For Serena's family, for her classmates, and for the entire city of Surrey, the outrage had only just begun. In the days after Serena's body was found, messages poured onto her Facebook page. There was heartbreak from friends and condolences from strangers. The loss was still fresh, but already people wanted to do more than just to mourn. They wanted to be heard.
I'd been very scared at nighttime to be alone, especially because I live on my own. So I was relieved.
And while some are relieved, others say this is yet another example that more needs to be done to make Surrey safe.
Take back our communities.
Boyer is organizing a rally this weekend, saying the community has had enough.
We need boots on the ground in Surrey. We need more policing in Surrey.
On September the 28th, less than 2 weeks after Serena met her end, hundreds gathered in Newton for a rally. It was called Take Back Surrey. What began as a Facebook event spilled into the streets. Residents met at the senior centre, people were carrying signs, candles, and their voices were heavy with frustration. This wasn't really just about Serena, it was about the years of fear leading up to her passing.
The Newton Senior Centre was the site of yesterday's Take Back Surrey Rally for Change. The organizer of yesterday's event read a letter from Serena's mother.
Unfortunately, we, as her family, are still devastated by this loss, and we are not yet capable of attending events such as this to contribute our voice. Therefore, all we can offer is a few words. We are grateful for all that our neighbours and our community at large have done in the wake of her passing.
One speaker, Janet Izanik, described walking her dog near Highland Park. "I no longer feel safe," she said. She told of encountering people high in the bushes, of discarded garbage, and illicit substance paraphernalia that was just scattered along the path. She spoke of a neighbourhood that felt abandoned. She urged the city to install lighting, to cut back the overgrown shrubbery, to take action before more families suffered the same fate. Her words drew nods and cheers from the crowd, because in this town it seemed like everyone had their own similar stories. They had their own similar fears, and a growing sense of frustration. Serena's family chose not to attend the rally, because at that time the grief was just too raw. But they did send a statement. It was read aloud to the crowd by MC Bob Campbell, and it said, "We are aware that this tragedy has spurred into motion a movement to take back our city and to make the streets safe once more for its residents. It will not bring her back, but it will be heartening to know that another family will not be mourning the loss of a daughter and sister taken too soon. Thank you." The silence that followed gave way to pure grief, and then applause. At the rally, Serena's name was spoken alongside others. People like Julie Pascal and Maple Battalia. Maple's mother even stood before the microphone. She spoke to the crowd, saying, "Today, they killed my daughter 3 years ago. Maybe tomorrow, your daughter. That's why we need to get together and change the law." Her words held power. These weren't just hypotheticals. They were her lived experience, and everyone in Surrey understood exactly what she meant. More vigils followed. Candles flickered in parks and schoolyards. Posters with Serena's face hung from lampposts. Friends spoke about her laughter, her creativity, her love of music. Teachers remembered her as spirited and full of potential. The rallies and the vigils weren't just speaking about safety. There was people speaking about their memories of Serena and other victims. They didn't want anyone to be reduced to a headline or a statistic. Every candle that was lit was also a demand. Every speech was also an accusation. And that is because Serena's passing was not seen as unavoidable. It was seen as completely preventable. And these vigils also marked a turning point. This city needed answers. And these answers would not be sought in the streets, but in the courtrooms.
Since his arrest, Raymond Casey's criminal past has made for startling headlines. Today, an officer who arrested him back in 1989 says he knew Casey would commit more crimes. At just 18, Casey was charged with kidnapping in Dryden, Ontario.
He exited an eastbound Greyhound bus and followed a young lady home to her apartment.
Casey was sentenced to 2 years in prison.
I just thought, this is the kind of behavior that could come back in years to come. And unfortunately, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now, just over a year since he was again released from prison, Casey is charged with the murder of Serena Vermeersch.
The only way to prevent dangerous repeat offenders from committing other crimes is to not let them out into the community. There is no amount of monitoring that is as good as keeping someone behind bars.
BC's former Attorney General says in a free society, it's not that easy.
We live in a democracy, and we can't be imprisoning people who have already done their time in jail.
But for the man who arrested Casey nearly 25 years ago, something needs to change.
Again, my heart goes out to the families of those victims. I don't know how to fix the system, but I certainly think that there are folks out there who could fix this system.
Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
So, after the vigils faded, the legal process began. It was slow and drawn out, and for Serena's family, it meant years of waiting. Raymond Lee Casey was charged with second-degree murder in September of 2014, but trials in Canada move cautiously. There are endless hearings, motions, and delays. Serena's family sat through appearance after appearance, each one just inching the case forward, but not offering any closure. At his early hearings, Casey appeared calm. He was almost expressionless as he sat in a prisoner's box, unmoved, whilst his lawyers and the judges discussed his fate. The man charged with ending Serena was the very same man that the police had warned about, the same man that parole boards had branded a danger, the same man who, by his own admission, feared that he himself would reoffend. And so, for 3 years, the case crept forward, and the Vermeersch family was forced to wait on. But finally, in September of 2017, something shifted. Casey entered a new Westminster courtroom, and instead of contesting the charges, he stood and pleaded guilty. He admitted he was guilty of second-degree murder, and now the facts of Serena's final night could be laid bare. Everyone in court heard how, on the evening of September 15th, 2014, Serena had boarded the bus at 8:15 p.m. She was heading home, much as she had done so many times before. Casey then followed her after she disembarked. He trailed her along the streets of East Newton, and then he cornered her near the railway tracks. Serena resisted. She fought back. The judge would later call her brave for trying to save herself. But of course, Casey overpowered her. He applied pressure to her neck, and then he just left her by the tracks, cold and alone, until she was finally found. The courtroom was quiet as these details were read. Family members wept. Supporters held each other, and Casey still just stared ahead, seemingly unmoved. Second-degree murder in Canada carries an automatic life sentence, but the length of parole ineligibility is set by the judge. This is anywhere between 10 and 25 years. The Crown and Defence made a joint submission. They asked for 17 years before Casey could apply for parole. But that number was not simply random. It was on the higher end of typical second-degree cases. But strangely, it was not the maximum. The judge considered the submission carefully. He reviewed Raymond Casey's history. There was the Dryden kidnapping attempt in 1989. There was the brutal Abbotsford Museum attack in 1991. Then there was a 22 years in prison marked by substances, by weapons and by defiance. And then there was the endless warnings from parole boards. There was the police's public bulletin describing him as a danger. The judge looked at all of this evidence, and then he looked at Serena's case. He called Casey a predator, a violent and merciless man without a conscience, and he declared that Casey had taken her life without any remorse. And so the sentence was officially read: life in prison, no chance of parole for 17 years. The courtroom held its breath. Some had hoped for the maximum of 25, but the law accepted the joint submission. Defense lawyer Troy Anderson spoke outside afterwards. He said, "He pleaded guilty. I think that's the strongest indication of remorse that you can have." But reporters pressed him on this. Did Casey show regret? Did he ever actually apologize? And the lawyer simply repeated, "The guilty plea speaks for itself." But for most in the community, and frankly for me too, it did not. To the public, Casey had shown no true remorse whatsoever. In fact, given the situation, it seems like there is an inevitability that all of this will just happen again. Serena's family, through their lawyer, declined to speak directly. For them, their grief was private. But the meaning of the sentence was clear. Casey would be taken off of the streets for some time, and for them that was something. But obviously, it's not enough, because nothing could undo the fact that he had already been released whilst dangerous once before. And just quickly, let's put this into perspective. Raymond Casey will be eligible for parole in 2034. We're now in 2025, and that date sounds very, very close. The murderer will only be in his 60s. The judge, however, did try to offer reassurance, saying it was not inconceivable that Casey would never be released, and those words could give some comfort. But if his history is anything to go by, I wouldn't hold my breath. Locally, Serena's name became a rallying cry, a symbol of what happens when warnings are ignored, when public safety is treated as secondary to process. Her story pushed residents into the streets. It pushed difficult conversations. It forced politicians to promise reform. It exposed the cracks in a system that is meant to protect. But beyond all of that, Serena's story should still be remembered for something else, for what it truly is. Serena was more than headlines. She was more than vigils. She offered more than outrage. She was laughter, she was music, she was creativity. She was a daughter, a girlfriend, a friend, a teenager with dreams. Who knows where life could have taken her? As the candles burned out at the vigils and the rallies faded, one thing still remained. Serena's voice, still online, still there for anyone who presses play. It's not much, but it is something. A reminder that she was real, that she did live, and that she still matters. Remember to hit subscribe if you appreciate what I'm doing here. Be careful out there. I'll see you soon.
So, I'll talk to you guys soon, and I hope you have a good day and smile a lot, because smiling's good, and you're beautiful, and I love you. Bye!